You need to leave. This store is for serious buyers, not window shoppers who clearly cannot afford what we offer. The words echoed across the marble floors of Marcotte timepieces, slicing through the quiet hum of conversation like a blade. Douglas Hartwell, the store manager, stood stiff behind the main counter, his chin slightly raised, his gray eyes cold with the certainty of someone convinced he was enforcing not only policy, but a natural social order. The handful of well-dressed customers in the boutique paused, their eyes turning toward the man being addressed. Malcolm Reed stood calmly, his right hand resting lightly on the strap of a well-worn leather briefcase, his navy blazer, crisp white shirt open at the collar, and tailored dark slacks reflected a kind of understated elegance that spoke to his professional success. But it was not the kind of success Douglas Hartwell recognized or respected. To Douglas, Malcolm's skin color had already written his story. "I have an appointment. Malcolm Reed. 3 o'clock." Malcolm said steadily, his tone calm but carrying the quiet authority of a man who had faced far greater challenges than a dismissive store manager. Douglas's smile was tight and insincere. He made no move to consult the appointment log. "I think you are mistaken. Appointments for private consultations are reserved for serious clientele, individuals who belong in this environment, not those who wander in hoping to browse luxury they cannot afford." Behind Douglas, a young sales associate shifted uncomfortably. She glanced at the tablet displaying the day's schedule. Malcolm's name was clearly listed, but Douglas's sharp glance froze her in place before she could speak. Her lips parted slightly, but fear or loyalty or both kept her silent. Near the Rolex display, a man in a tailored gray suit smirked and resumed inspecting a timepiece. Across the room, an older white couple watched the scene unfold without a word, their expressions betraying no surprise, only confirmation of what they already believed. "I confirmed my appointment yesterday with your assistant manager, Miss Cortez," Malcolm continued. His voice remained even, though he could feel the weight of every eye in the store pressing against him. Douglas did not bother to hide his disdain. "Miss Cortez does not have the authority to book consultations for walk-ins. Perhaps you should consider one of our more accessible locations." The emphasis on accessible was deliberate and unmistakable. Before Malcolm could reply, Douglas raised his hand sharply. "Security." From his post near the entrance, a tall man in a black suit stepped forward. His face was expressionless, his stride measured and confident. The move was rehearsed, professional, and completely unnecessary. Malcolm kept his posture relaxed, his chin high, his eyes steady. "I have done nothing disruptive. I arrived for a scheduled appointment." Douglas's response was immediate. "Your presence is disruption enough. We have a standard to uphold, and that standard does not include entertaining unfounded claims from individuals who lack the necessary standing." The sales associate at the counter inhaled sharply but remained silent. She knew, and Malcolm could see it in her eyes. She knew he was telling the truth. But fear of opposing Douglas, or perhaps fear of losing her job, kept her quiet. The security guard reached out, placing a firm but seemingly polite hand on Malcolm's elbow. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Malcolm did not recoil. His eyes dropped briefly to the hand on his arm before returning to Douglas's face. In the years he had built his company from nothing, he had encountered every form of dismissal, condescension, and silent prejudice, but rarely had it been as public, as deliberate, or as absolute as this. Without removing the guard's hand, Malcolm reached into the pocket of his blazer with his free hand. He drew out his phone, unlocked it, and calmly opened his notes app. He typed with deliberate slowness, "Douglas Hartwell, store manager, denied scheduled appointment, removed without cause. Witnesses present, date, time." As he typed, he noticed movement from the corner of his eye, near the Cartier display. A young man in his 20s held a phone at chest level. Unlike the other customers, this man's eyes held no judgment or amusement. Their gazes met briefly. The young man nodded almost imperceptibly before returning his attention to his phone. Douglas noticed the exchange. Photography is not allowed inside the showroom. The young man tucked his phone back into his jacket. "Just texting my wife," he replied, feigning casual disinterest. Malcolm finished his note and lowered his phone. He had no intention of arguing. He had gathered what he needed, not for protest, not for appeal, but for documentation, for evidence. "Sir, please." The guard's grip tightened slightly. His tone was still professional, but the underlying message was clear. "You are no longer welcome here." Malcolm allowed himself to be guided toward the door. His dignity intact. He did not protest. He did not raise his voice. He moved with the quiet assurance of a man who understood the difference between perceived power and real power. As the glass doors opened and the cool air of the afternoon swept over him, Malcolm paused briefly at the threshold. He looked back once, memorizing the faces of those who had chosen to watch in silence. They had made their decision. Now it was time for him to make his. The security guard's grip tightened fractionally, the kind of subtle increase in pressure designed to remind a person of their lack of options. Malcolm Reed felt the shift but did not resist. His breath remained steady, his posture upright. He had been through this before in different forms, though rarely so publicly, so deliberately staged for the comfort of others watching from the shadows of polished glass cases and velvet-lined counters. As he was guided toward the entrance, the young man near the Cartier display slipped quietly into Malcolm's peripheral vision. He was no longer pretending to text. His phone, angled just below chest height, recorded everything: the dismissal, the silence of the staff, the customers who watched without comment, the security guard's firm hand on Malcolm's arm. In that brief moment, their eyes met again. No words passed between them, but the understanding was mutual. Witnesses were scarce. Proof was essential. Douglas Hartwell followed closely behind, his polished shoes striking the floor with the certainty of a man convinced he had exercised proper judgment. "Let's make this easy for everyone," Douglas said, loud enough for the surrounding customers to hear. "Our clientele values discretion. We prefer not to involve the police unless absolutely necessary." It was a threat, veiled as civility. Malcolm knew it well. It was a tactic meant to transform the victim into the aggressor, to paint compliance as the only reasonable path forward. Outside the boutique, the afternoon had cooled. Autumn's early bite swept through the open doorway as Malcolm stepped onto the sidewalk. The glass doors whispered shut behind him, severing the final connection to the room where judgment had been passed without evidence, without discussion, without pause. The guard released his hold but remained standing just inside the doorway, arms crossed, watching to ensure Malcolm did not attempt to re-enter. For a long moment, Malcolm stood still. He could feel the stares from inside, faint through the glass but unmistakable. The same customers who had watched in silence now returned to their displays, reassured that order had been restored, the disturbance removed, their world unshaken, but not for long. Malcolm took a breath, long and measured, and opened his phone once more. He reviewed the note he had made moments earlier: names, times, the nature of the dismissal. He added another line: young male witness, video evidence captured, possible corroboration. He turned his gaze back to the store, through the glass. He saw Douglas confer with the young sales associate. She gestured toward the tablet where the appointment log remained open. Douglas's face darkened, but he shook his head sharply and dismissed her concern. The lie had been committed. Admitting error now would require more courage than he possessed. Malcolm's phone vibrated softly in his hand. A text message appeared from an unfamiliar number. "I have the footage. If you want it, I'll send it anonymously. No one will know it was me." Malcolm typed a brief response. "Yes, please send. Thank you for your courage." Within seconds, the video file arrived. Malcolm opened it, watching as the events replayed in crisp detail: Douglas's refusal, the dismissive tone. The moment the security guard placed a hand on Malcolm's arm, the young man's footage had captured not just the actions, but the atmosphere, the complicity of silence. The quiet approval of an audience unwilling to challenge the unfolding injustice. Malcolm saved the file and immediately backed it up to a secure cloud drive linked to his business account. Evidence was fragile. Memory was fallible. But video did not forget. As he stood reviewing the footage, a black SUV approached from down the street. Its tinted windows reflected the late afternoon light, casting brief shadows across the boutique's entrance. The vehicle pulled to a smooth stop at the curb. The driver, dressed in a dark suit, stepped out and approached Malcolm without a word, opening the rear passenger door. Before entering, Malcolm cast one final glance at Marcotte timepieces. Behind the glass, Douglas had returned to his position behind the counter, speaking with a customer as though nothing had occurred. The young sales associate kept her distance, her face pale, her posture tense. She had seen the truth. She had been silenced by it. Malcolm entered the vehicle and settled into the leather seat. His executive assistant, Elena, sat waiting, a tablet already active in her lap. "The transition papers are ready," she said without preamble. "We can execute the acquisition this afternoon. Would you like to proceed?" Malcolm nodded once. "Yes, but delay any public announcements. I want them to sit in the certainty of their actions a little longer." Elena made a note on the tablet. "Understood. Legal is finalizing the press release and preparing the HR protocols for the leadership audit." Malcolm's gaze remained fixed on the boutique receding into the distance as the SUV pulled away. His reflection in the window was calm, composed. The face of a man not seeking revenge but ensuring accountability. They thought they were removing a problem, Malcolm said quietly, more to himself than to Elena. Instead, they removed their last chance to correct a mistake before it became a lesson. Elena did not reply. She understood. Behind them, Marcotte Timepieces continued its daily business, unaware that the foundation beneath it had already shifted. The SUV came to a smooth stop at the curb directly across from Marcotte Timepieces. The boutique's shining facade gleamed in the fading afternoon light, a symbol of prestige, luxury, and until today, unchecked prejudice. Inside the vehicle, Malcolm Reed sat composed, his expression unreadable. The phone in his hand displayed the video sent earlier, the evidence of his removal recorded without his knowledge, but now central to what was about to unfold. Beside him, Elena reviewed documents on her tablet. She wore the calm focus of someone accustomed to managing high-stakes negotiations, but even she understood this situation was unlike any they had encountered before. "The corporate transition is officially completed," she reported. "The Marcotte board transferred full operational control this morning. You are now the principal decision-maker. Do you want me to notify the regional director?" "Not yet," Malcolm replied. "First, let's make sure the right people are present." As he spoke, two additional black SUVs pulled up behind them. From the first emerged David Price, the chief operating officer of Malcolm's holding company. From the second, Catherine Blake, the head of legal affairs, followed by two compliance officers dressed in professional black suits. None of them carried briefcases or paperwork. Their presence was the paperwork. Their arrival was the message. David opened Malcolm's door without a word. Malcolm stepped out onto the sidewalk, the cool air brushing against his face. Across the street, customers continued browsing inside the boutique, unaware of the gathering storm. "Proceed," Malcolm instructed. David gave a short nod and turned to speak into a communication device clipped discreetly to his lapel. Moments later, a silver sedan arrived bearing the Marcotte district manager and the corporate public relations director. Their faces were tight with concern, their eyes scanning the scene with increasing anxiety. "We should move quickly," Catherine advised. "The longer we wait, the greater the chance this spirals out of our narrative." Malcolm crossed the street at a measured pace, his team falling into step behind him. Each stride was purposeful, not rushed. Every second served to build anticipation, both for those inside the boutique and for the onlookers who had begun to gather nearby. Sensing that something unusual was unfolding, the boutique's automatic doors parted as Malcolm approached. Douglas Hartwell stood behind the counter, consulting with a customer. His earlier triumph, written in the relaxed set of his shoulders and the self-satisfied tilt of his head. The security guard remained near the entrance, arms crossed, his gaze sweeping the sidewalk to ensure Malcolm did not return. As the group entered, the air shifted. Conversations ceased. The customers sensed it first, the presence of authority, of change, but they could not yet understand its meaning. The security guard stepped forward instinctively. "Sir, I must ask you to leave the premises immediately." David intercepted him smoothly. "That will not be necessary." Douglas looked up sharply, his brow furrowing. "What is the meaning of this? We do not permit group entries without appointments. You are disrupting." His voice faltered as he recognized the individuals accompanying Malcolm. His gaze landed last on Catherine Blake, whose reputation as a corporate legal strategist was known to anyone with even a passing awareness of the industry. "I believe you already know Mr. Reed," Catherine began, her tone polite but edged with steel. Though you may not have understood who he was earlier today, Douglas paled but attempted to maintain his composure. "We had a situation involving a misunderstanding. This man, Mr. Reed, did not have a confirmed appointment and was asked to leave to avoid disturbing our clientele. That is not what the records show," Elena replied, producing a tablet. "The schedule confirms Mr. Reed's 3 o'clock consultation, booked by your assistant manager, authorized within standard policy." The young sales associate stepped forward then, her hands trembling slightly but her voice clear. "It's true. I saw the appointment myself. Mr. Reed was listed." I tried to speak up. Douglas rounded on her. "You should have brought it to me directly." "She did," Catherine stated, "and you dismissed her concerns." The customers were no longer pretending disinterest. They gathered near the displays, watching openly now. Sensing the shift from an internal store matter to a much larger reckoning, Malcolm spoke for the first time. His voice was calm, controlled, but carried the weight of finality. "Let me clarify the situation. Mr. Hartwell, this morning, my holding company finalized the acquisition of Marcotte Timepieces. I now hold majority ownership of this location and all affiliated branches. Your refusal of service to me was not merely a lapse in judgment. It was a violation of the very values this company claims to uphold." Douglas's face drained of color. His mouth opened, but no words came. "And it will have consequences." Malcolm continued. "Your decision to judge a client based on appearance, to deny a confirmed appointment, and to authorize the physical removal of a guest without cause constitutes grounds for immediate dismissal." The security guard took a half-step back. "I am terminating your employment effective immediately," Malcolm said. "You will surrender all company credentials and leave the premises." Before Douglas could respond, Catherine added, "The compliance team will conduct a full investigation into today's events, including staff conduct and client interactions. We will also be reviewing the actions of all employees and customers involved in the incident." One of the customers near the Rolex display, the same man who had smirked earlier, shifted uncomfortably. He turned away, pretending sudden interest in a brochure. Furthermore, Malcolm continued, "The security guard involved in my removal will be placed on unpaid leave pending review. His actions were unprofessional and violated both corporate policy and basic standards of respect." The guard nodded stiffly. "Understood, sir." Douglas finally found his voice. "I didn't know who you were." "If I had known, that is precisely the problem," Malcolm interrupted, raising a hand. "Respect should not require recognition of status. Dignity is not contingent upon power." A ripple of acknowledgement passed through the crowd. Even those who had initially remained silent now seemed to grasp the broader implications of what they had witnessed. Elena stepped forward. "We will also be issuing a public statement acknowledging the incident and outlining steps to ensure such behavior is never repeated." As if on cue, a small group of reporters appeared outside the boutique's glass doors. Word had spread quickly. Someone, perhaps the young man who had recorded the earlier encounter, had alerted the media. Catherine addressed the growing audience. Today's actions mark not just the enforcement of corporate policy, but the reinforcement of basic human values. This store and this brand will no longer tolerate prejudice disguised as policy or bias disguised as business practice. Douglas's shoulders slumped. The authority he had wielded so confidently hours earlier had evaporated, leaving only the consequences of his decisions. Malcolm turned to the young sales associate. "You attempted to do the right thing and were silenced. That ends now, effective immediately. You are promoted to interim floor manager pending final review." Her eyes widened in shock. She nodded, tears welling but held firmly in check. One of the customers, the woman from the Cartier section, stepped forward hesitantly. I was here earlier. I saw what happened. I remained silent. That was wrong." Catherine nodded. "We will accept written statements from any witnesses willing to come forward. Silence may protect privilege temporarily, but it does not absolve responsibility." Outside, the reporters began broadcasting live. Viewers across the city and beyond would soon learn not just of the firing of a prejudiced manager, but of the broader cultural shift unfolding within one of the most exclusive retail spaces in the country, as the legal team began coordinating next steps. Malcolm remained standing at the center of the boutique. He glanced toward the young man who had filmed the incident, though still standing near the back. The man's posture was straighter now, no longer attempting to blend into the crowd. Malcolm approached him. "Your footage was the turning point. Without it, this would have been another silent injustice. I just did what seemed right." The young man replied. "And that," Malcolm said, "is how change begins, behind them." The boutique that had once excluded him was now a place of reckoning, of accountability, and soon of reform. And this was only the beginning. Silence filled the boutique, heavy and absolute, as Douglas Hartwell stood frozen in place. The authority he had once projected with such certainty had dissolved, replaced by the oppressive weight of accountability. The customers, the staff, even the security guard now kept their eyes lowered, as if doing so could somehow erase their roles in what had unfolded. Malcolm Reed did not raise his voice. He did not need to. His mere presence, reinforced by the gathered corporate team and the undeniable truth of the evidence in hand, was enough to command the room. Catherine Blake, standing at his side, maintained a professional detachment, but even she could not fully conceal the quiet satisfaction in her eyes. This was not vengeance. It was justice, long overdue and delivered without the chaos of anger or the noise of protest. "Mr. Hartwell," Malcolm began, his tone measured and clear. "Your actions today did more than violate corporate policy. You compromised the integrity of this establishment and the dignity of its clientele. You exercised personal bias under the guise of professional discretion as the new principal owner of Marcotte Timepieces. I hereby terminate your employment effective immediately." Douglas opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to defend himself, perhaps to beg for reconsideration, but no words emerged. His career, built over 2 decades, unraveled in a single, irreversible moment. "The security guard who enforced your order without verifying the situation will be placed on immediate administrative leave," Malcolm continued. "A full review of his conduct will determine whether further disciplinary action is required." The guard nodded stiffly, resignation etched into every line of his face. The young sales associate, whom Malcolm had promoted to interim floor manager, stood quietly by the register, her hands clasped together tightly. Relief and nervous anticipation warred on her features. She had spoken up, albeit too late. But in the end, she had chosen the right side of history. Malcolm gestured to Elena, who stepped forward with a tablet in hand. In addition, all customers present during the incident will be reviewed. Those who encouraged or reinforced discriminatory behavior may be restricted from future service across all Marcotte locations. The ripple of shock was immediate. The man who had smirked near the Rolex display earlier paled visibly. The older couple who had observed in silence now exchanged anxious glances. Privilege, so often treated as a shield, was becoming a liability. Catherine addressed the room. Our legal department will conduct interviews and review the store's security footage in full. Cooperation is not optional. Transparency will be the standard moving forward. At that moment, the doors to the boutique opened once more. The district manager, accompanied by members of the compliance team and a corporate human resources representative, entered. Their expressions were grave. They had been briefed during the short drive to the flagship store and understood the severity of what they were walking into. Mr. Reed, the district manager greeted formally. We stand ready to assist in the immediate implementation of your directives. Thank you, Malcolm replied. Begin by coordinating with Miss Blake and our compliance officers. Interviews should commence at once. Staff will be given the opportunity to provide statements. Those who demonstrate accountability and a willingness to embrace the new corporate values may be retained. Those who cannot will be dismissed. Douglas found his voice at last. You can't just dismantle everything because of one misunderstanding. Malcolm's eyes were steady, unwavering. This is not about dismantling. This is about rebuilding. Prejudice masquerading as discretion has no place in this company's future. A murmur of agreement spread among the staff. Some employees who had remained silent earlier now found the courage to nod. One of the junior sales associates, no older than 25, stepped forward. I should have spoken up sooner. I saw what happened. I knew it was wrong. Your honesty now will be noted, Catherine assured him, but it should serve as a reminder that silence can carry as much weight as action. The reporters outside the boutique continued to film. Though none dared to interrupt, the story had already begun circulating on social media. The footage captured by the young man earlier had gone viral, framing the narrative not as a simple customer service dispute but as a defining moment of corporate accountability. Elena leaned toward Malcolm, lowering her voice. Public reaction is overwhelmingly supportive. Civil rights groups are already referencing this as a potential landmark in retail reform. Malcolm nodded. Let them. Change begins with accountability, but it grows through transparency. Douglas removed his name badge and access card, placing them on the counter with shaking hands. He looked not at Malcolm but at the customers and staff who had once accepted his authority without question. Now, none of them met his gaze. The power he had wielded so easily had evaporated, leaving only the consequences of choices made and actions taken. As he turned to leave, the young man who had recorded the original incident stepped forward. Sir, He paused. Unsure whether to continue, Malcolm gestured for him to speak. I just wanted to say I'm glad I filmed what happened. People deserve to know the truth. And they will, Malcolm assured him. Your courage helped make that possible. The young man nodded, relief and pride mingling in his expression. The HR representative spoke next. Shall we proceed with staff interviews? Yes, Malcolm confirmed, and inform all Marcotte locations that new training protocols will be implemented effective immediately. This will not be a single store correction. This will be an industry benchmark. The district manager glanced toward Douglas, then back at Malcolm. Understood. As the compliance team moved to begin their work, Malcolm addressed the remaining customers and staff. This is not solely about punishing wrongdoing. It is about creating an environment where dignity is non-negotiable, where respect is the default, not the reward for status. Several customers nodded. including the woman from the Cartier section who had earlier admitted her silence. She approached the counter. Her shoulders squared. "I would like to submit a statement as a witness." Catherine smiled faintly. "We will accept it gladly." Malcolm surveyed the room one final time. What had once been a space defined by exclusion and silent prejudice was now transforming into a forum of accountability. The change was not yet complete, but the foundation had been laid. "Let's begin," he said. Douglas walked out alone. His departure witnessed by the very people who had once supported his authority, the silence that accompanied him now was not one of respect, but of recognition. A recognition that the world was changing, and that those unwilling to change with it would be left behind. Malcolm turned back to his team. The work was only beginning, and this time, there would be no turning back. The days following Douglas Hartwell's dismissal were not marked by quiet reflection, but by swift, decisive action. Malcolm Reed had never been a leader content with surface-level change or symbolic gestures. His vision extended beyond a single store, beyond a single moment of accountability. He understood that if dignity was to be restored and protected within Marcotte timepieces, the transformation needed to be comprehensive, measurable, and permanent. The first directive issued under his leadership was the suspension of all ongoing customer service operations across the company's flagship locations. This bold move drew both praise and criticism in the industry. But Malcolm remained unmoved by the clamor of public opinion. He convened a task force composed of civil rights advocates, corporate ethics consultants, long-serving employees, and customers who had experienced both the best and the worst of Marcotte's service culture. Elena coordinated the task force meetings with relentless precision. Catherine Blake oversaw the legal framework, ensuring that the reforms would not only withstand scrutiny, but would serve as a new industry benchmark. The young sales associate, now officially appointed as the floor manager of the flagship boutique, provided insights from the front lines of customer interaction. Even the young man who had filmed the original incident was invited to contribute, his perspective representing the voices of those who had too often been ignored. Within 2 weeks, the task force introduced the Marcotte Standard of Dignity Protocol, a comprehensive training and accountability program designed to retrain every employee from senior executives to part-time sales associates. The program emphasized not just legal compliance, but the recognition of unconscious bias, the cultivation of empathy, and the establishment of clear, enforceable expectations for equitable treatment of all clients. Participation in the program was mandatory. Employees who chose not to engage were offered severance packages and dismissed without prejudice. For those willing to confront uncomfortable truths and grow from them, the program provided not only education, but a pathway to advancement within the company. Even Douglas Hartwell, despite his dismissal, was extended the opportunity to enroll in the training, though many advised against such an offer. Malcolm insisted redemption should be available to those willing to earn it, even if few chose to accept. The changes were not limited to personnel training. Store layouts were redesigned to promote openness and accessibility, removing subtle barriers that had long served to separate the preferred clientele from those deemed less desirable. Marketing campaigns shifted focus from exclusivity to excellence, redefining prestige not as a function of who could be excluded, but as a standard of service accessible to all who walked through Marcotte's doors. At the grand reopening of the flagship boutique, Malcolm addressed a gathering of employees, customers, media representatives, and community leaders. His speech was measured but powerful. This company once confused luxury with entitlement, and policy with prejudice. We have all witnessed the cost of that confusion, but today, we commit not just to change, but to leadership in fostering dignity, equity, and respect in every interaction. For every client, the applause that followed was genuine, not polite. It came not only from those who had supported the reforms from the beginning, but also from those who had once doubted whether such transformation was possible. As the new Marcotte Standard was rolled out across other locations, Malcolm received reports of employees embracing the changes with unexpected enthusiasm. Conversations about bias and respect, once considered divisive or uncomfortable, became part of the daily culture. Former skeptics emerged as advocates. Clients who had previously experienced exclusion returned, not out of curiosity but out of renewed trust. A month after the flagship reopening, Malcolm visited a smaller Marcotte boutique in a neighboring city. He arrived unannounced, dressed as he had been on that first fateful day, simple blazer, open-collar shirt, and leather briefcase. No entourage, no press. The staff greeted him with genuine warmth, not because they recognized his authority, but because the new training had instilled in them the habit of offering respect without precondition. As he moved through the store, observing the subtle but meaningful changes, the young floor manager approached. She had been promoted from within the ranks. A participant in the first training cohort, Mr. Reed. "Welcome. We're honored by your visit." Malcolm smiled. "No need for formality. I'm just here to see how the new standards are living beyond the policy manuals." She nodded. "We had an incident last week. A customer made a disparaging remark toward another client. Our staff addressed it immediately, not by escalating but by calmly reinforcing our commitment to respect and dignity. And how did the customer respond? They left. But the other client stayed. She made a significant purchase and thanked us for standing by our values." Malcolm felt a quiet sense of affirmation, change. He knew was not measured by perfection, but by progress, by the moments when the right choice was made without fear or hesitation. As he prepared to leave, the manager added, "Some employees who were hesitant at first have become the strongest supporters of the new standards. They say they no longer feel like enforcers of status. They feel like ambassadors of excellence." Malcolm offered a final nod. "That is exactly the kind of legacy we are building." Outside, the evening air carried the promise of a season turning. The journey from exclusion to inclusion, from silence to accountability, was far from over. But the foundation had been laid, not with grand gestures, but with consistent, courageous choices. And this time, the transformation would endure. 2 months after the incident that had once threatened to define him not as a leader, but as a target of prejudice, Malcolm Reed returned quietly to the flagship Marcotte Timepieces boutique. No media accompanied him this time. No compliance officers or legal teams shadowed his steps. The transformation he had set in motion no longer required his constant presence. It had become self-sustaining, embedded in the culture he had reshaped with purpose and resolve. The boutique's interior had changed. The physical design now reflected the values Malcolm had championed. Gone were the subtle barriers that once divided clients into categories of worthiness. The layout was open, inviting, designed not to impress, but to welcome. The staff moved with a new confidence, not born from fear of enforcement, but from a genuine belief in the principles they upheld. As Malcolm walked the floor, several employees paused to greet him respectfully, but none with the deference reserved for a distant authority figure. They saw him now as a collaborator, not a distant owner issuing mandates from an office tower. The young floor manager he had promoted approached, her posture straight, her eyes clear. "Mr. Reed, welcome back. The transition has been challenging, but the team has embraced the change fully." "And the clients?" Malcolm asked. She smiled. "They have noticed. Some mentioned the difference immediately. Others simply returned, choosing us over competitors. Respect is now part of the Marcotte brand, not an afterthought." Malcolm nodded, his gaze sweeping the room. He noticed an elderly couple browsing near the Patek Philippe display. They were the same couple who had once watched his public dismissal in silence. Today, they browsed without judgment, their demeanor relaxed. their eyes meeting those of the staff with quiet courtesy. Change, Malcolm knew, often came not with declarations, but with small, repeated actions. As he turned to leave, a familiar voice called out, "Mr. Reed." He paused. The young man who had filmed the original incident stepped forward from the crowd. He was dressed more professionally now, his youthful uncertainty replaced by purpose. "I wanted to thank you. Because of what happened, I realized how important it is to speak up. I've since joined a community organization focused on workplace equity. We help people who face similar situations advocate for themselves." Malcolm extended his hand. "You turned a moment into a movement. That takes courage." The handshake was firm, the gesture simple but profound. Outside, as Malcolm exited the boutique, a light breeze stirred the autumn leaves along the sidewalk. The world had not changed overnight. Prejudice still lingered in many places, silent or overt. But here, in this space that had once symbolized exclusion, dignity had taken root. Before he departed, Malcolm paused to read the new placard displayed near the entrance. The words, carefully chosen by the task force, reflected not only company policy, but a broader philosophy. Every client deserves respect and dignity. Discrimination in any form will be addressed promptly and transparently. We honor not just those with status, but every individual who enters our doors. Malcolm smiled softly, not because the battle was over, but because the journey had begun. Change, he thought, was not an event. It was a commitment, one that must be renewed every day. And in this place, at least, that commitment would endure. If you believe respect should never depend on appearance or status, type dignity in the comments and share where you're watching from. Subscribe and share this story so silence never protects injustice again.